I'd clap for me, too. Happy Monday, everyone. All right, San Francisco has opened the first free food market where shoppers can leave without paying. Residents are reportedly confused how this is different from any other store in the city. In L.A., a new taxpayer-funded high-rise for homeless people now open. We're talking luxury apartments. There's a gym, a cafe, skyline views. And to make the residents feel at home, each unit features 2 coats of fresh urine. According to a new Pew poll, my favorite kind, 65% say gender is determined by sex at birth, while 34% say a person can change that gender later in life, while 10% of drunk men polled after closing time said, I swear to God, I thought that was a chick. We've all been there. It's a man applauding heavily. Yep. He knows what I'm talking about. Chicago's progressive mayor, Brandon Johnson, spent $30,000 in campaign contributions on his own private makeup artist during his first year in office. But you got to admit, the artist did an amazing job. My God. During a rodeo in Oregon on Saturday, 4 people were injured after a bull jumped over a fence and injured 4 people in the crowd. The same thing happened at The View once when Joy Behar saw someone in the audience holding a plate of bacon. This weekend, Donald Trump told a Nevada crowd he would eliminate taxes on tips. What's a tip? Asked one man. Very cheap. Very cheap individual. In his gun trial, Hunter Biden decided not to take the stand in his own defense. Apparently, he wanted to be sworn in with his hand on a stripper's ass. The X account, Twitter, for Boston Celtic legend Bill Russell tweeted, "Let's go Celtics," last night. Turns out those tweets were written by his wife because he's been dead for 2 years. Sounds like he has a lot in common with Joe Biden. By the way, wait. Did you know that Joe also won 11 championships with the Celtics? Yeah, now you feel differently. And finally, I think it's finally, one of the world's oldest penguins at age 30 successfully mated with a 4-year-old male. The couple canceled their plans to marry, saying the male got cold feet. That joke was for your grandmother. So in Vegas over the weekend, Trump slammed electric mandates for boats after telling the crowd about a chat he had with a boat maker. I wonder, did he ask what would happen if the boat sank from its weight and you're in the boat and you have this tremendously powerful battery?
What would happen if the boat sank from its weight and you're in the boat and you have this tremendously powerful battery and the battery's now underwater and there's a shark that's approximately 10 yards over there? By the way, a lot of shark attacks lately. Do you notice that?
Hold on, there's a shark 10 yards away from the boat. Do I get electrocuted?
So there's a shark 10 yards away from the boat, 10 yards. Or here, do I get electrocuted if the boat is sinking, water goes over the battery, the boat is sinking? Do I stay on top of the boat and get electrocuted? Or do I jump over by the shark and not get electrocuted? Because I will tell you, he didn't know the answer. He said, you know, nobody's ever asked me that question.
It is a great question. Electrocution or eaten by shark? We should give death row inmates the choice. Yeah. I like the way you guys think. I bet Trump also said, I think it's a good question.
I said, I think it's a good question. I think there's a lot of electric current coming through that water. But you know what I'd do if there was a shark or you get electrocuted? I'll take electrocution every single time. I'm not getting near the shark.
I don't blame him. And I'm sure Biden agrees. Electrocution is how they restart his heart every day. 2 zaps to the bolts in his neck. Speaking of Joe, he's hemorrhaging voters like Jesse sheds follicles. Suddenly, it's Trump who looks like he can unite the country. And this is scaring the crap out of the Dems. They're melting down like Cher's face in direct sunlight. Over the weekend, the LA Times had this headline, quote, "In Silicon Valley, more support for Trump is trickling in. Is it a big threat to Biden?" Well, consider that tickets to a recent Trump fundraiser reportedly went for $300,000 each, and the event was sold out. Apparently, Trump raised $12 million in one night, the same amount I offered Taylor Swift to stop calling me. Now, the big tech money may still go Democrat, but cracks are starting to form, and they're deeper than the ones in Pelosi's face. It's no secret that the black and Hispanic vote, mostly men, is shifting toward Trump. This as smart national figures are now willing to come out publicly for Trump. For instance, rapper 50 Cent says he sees black men identifying with Trump in the upcoming election because they got RICO charges. Which means Fani Willis's bogus RICO prosecution of Trump may be the biggest backfire since Joe forgot his lactose pills after a pint of Haagen-Dazs. But don't take it from me. Vegas odds have Trump the favorite to win and Joe as the favorite to star in The Walking Dead. Meanwhile, talking lizard James Carville had to gripe, "I thought that President Biden should not run for re-election." He said this right before devouring a plate of sautéed worms. So if all the smart money and people are shifting to Trump, who are the holdouts? Meaning the people in our public life who are well-informed enough to know better but still insist on backing a brain-dead Biden. I'll tell you who. It's the rich and famous, paralyzed by their own egos, who look at Trump with envy. Think about it. Imagine being Robert De Niro or Stephen King or Howard Stern or Jimmy Kimmel, and you just got the memo that you aren't the center of the universe. And that memo is on Donald Trump letterhead. Instead of the working class being ignored, it's these elitist bozos. It's these powerful men, successful in their own right, that Trump makes them feel small. If you notice, Trump's loudest critics are successful people who sense their own insignificance in this new world of Trump. They feel like I do when taking a picture with Tyrus. It's also why has-beens like Liz Cheney, Michael Cohen, and Anthony Scaramucci are obsessed with taking Trump down. They're bit players in this movie, hoping that scene-stealing moment will come. But the most obvious example, the guy closest to Trump in temperament and personality, Howard Stern. As Trump elevated, Stern retreated, becoming a believer in the gospel of the 6-foot distancing rule, and used COVID to justify turning himself into Gloria Swanson, holed up in his 40,000-square-foot mansion, dictating to everyone how stupid and murderous they were for not having what he had. And what does Stern have in common with Jimmy Kimmel? It's the sense of demotion. They realize the world doesn't revolve around them, a crushing realization if your ego is everything. Right now, Trump's more important than all of them combined, and it's killing them. Meanwhile, the smart but ego-satisfied person, whether it's Elon Musk or Vivek Ramaswamy or me, we don't take it personally that Trump may be the most consequential human alive, of course, just edging out Ryan Seacrest. But it's because these people can think larger, who know this election and, in fact, this nation are about more than just them, which is why they've got their necks out for Trump and their middle fingers out to the media. Meanwhile, the egotists have become extras in the film of their lives. And those who they once considered the extras have taken starring roles, that is, the electorate. They can't believe that the great unwashed are not listening to them, but instead this new leading man. And so they see Trump and they ask, why couldn't that be me? It's the one thing narcissists can't stand, being ignored on the world stage. Let's welcome tonight's guest. No, you don't have dementia. He's just that forgettable. Writer and comedian Joe DeVito. She's an expert in MMA, making men agitated. Host of Outkick the Morning on Outkick.com, Charlie Arnold. His sense of humor comes from his gut, his great, big, disgusting gut. Host of Fox News Saturday Night, Jimmy Fallon. She's the only reason your grandpa has Instagram. New York Times bestselling author and Fox News contributor, Kat Timm. Joe, what do you think of my theory? Because when you look at people successful across the board, there are some that are totally fine, and some of them aren't. And I have to believe it is this realization that after 3 or 4 decades in the limelight, they're finding out that they're not the center of the universe.
Yeah, well, Trump has that amazing ability to soak up all the air in any room. It's incredible. I mean, it's pretty funny we have someone like James Carville, who looks like Nosferatu, coming out and saying, I think Biden's past his prime. We got to move on. But you got to admit, at this point, a vote for Joe Biden is a vote for Kamala. I don't think he's going to make it to the debates, let alone the elections. I mean, I was watching him at the Normandy thing. I mean, those 100-year-old vets were like, do you want to sit? You don't look good. So they can't hide it.
Yeah.
They can't hide it. They try to get him his fancy hokas. They got him his footwear because that's why he was falling over. He was falling over because his body's saying, let me die. I want to die and get out of here. So, yeah, I mean, Trump, if you compare them, Joe babbles. And you think, this is not good to watch. But Trump comes out, it's not like someone asked a question about sharks and electric boats, but he had an answer ready.
Exactly.
He had an answer ready. Now, I don't know. I never looked at the movie Jaws and thought, what if they had an extension cord? That would have been a problem. But I think that's what's so hilarious about Trump is that you can see, and he's getting stronger, and he's getting more vital, and he's got that energy. Now, I would like if there were some younger people, maybe a fresh-faced 68-year-old, right?
Right, yes.
Okay? But I would like if someone said to me, did you hear the president pooped his pants? I could say, that probably didn't happen. I just want probably would make it happen.
It is funny, though. It was like, no one really has thought about the choice between electrocution and being eaten by a shark. That's the kind of person that I would like to have in the White House, as opposed to somebody who creates fantasies about their uncle being eaten by cannibals. But what do you think about the fact that, like, a lot of these people look at Trump and they go, like, I could have done that, and they're kind of mad that they didn't do it? Like, I think about that with Mark Cuban. I think that Mark Cuban has a problem with Trump actually being not just a billionaire, but also president, and he's still a billionaire.
Yeah, well, you look at Mark Cuban, and he's worn so many different hats. I mean, he went from being just a businessman to a sports team owner to really just being somebody that I think a lot of people at one point were able to relate to. Now it's a completely different story, myself included. I used to love Mark Cuban until now he's just inserted himself in so many different political conversations that he has no business in. But that's the thing about Trump. He also has worn so many hats. And, you know, he was a businessman. He's been a real estate investor. I mean, he is single-handedly responsible for building up New York to the point that it is today. He was, you know, on The Apprentice. He's a reality show star. He's now the, you know, former president of the United States, hopefully soon to be, you know, getting his second term here. But people just don't like that. They don't like the fact that he can say whatever's on his mind, that he does have a bit of an ego, but he has a point in everything that he's saying, and people are understanding that, and people are seeing the way that he's being treated with the sham trial, all of the convictions, and people are now starting to relate to him, and he's getting, I think, a lot of votes, or at least people getting on board with him that maybe wouldn't have been at another point in time. The Latino votes, the black votes, the young votes, the Silicon Valley crew, and you see people turning out in droves in deep blue states, not even organized rallies. I mean, people are just deciding, like, you know, what should we do this weekend? Should we go drinking? Should we go to the beach? Should we support Trump? And they're choosing to support Trump, which is awesome to see. And the Democrats' reactions, the best part of it all, because they're calling them, of course, domestic terrorists and things like that, because they don't know what to do with themselves. And especially the rally we just saw in Vegas this past weekend. So many people showed up there. Like, these people must be hired on Craigslist. It's like, no, Democrats, you're the ones that have to hire the influencers to support you, not the conservatives.
You know, Jimmy.
Yo.
You have no shame.
Stop it. I can't even, like, push back on an intro because I look like a fat cowboy today.
Yes.
I do. I thought I looked cool when I left my office, then I just got on set, saw the monitor. I look like Clint Feastwood.
You know, the thing is, though, I don't think, like, people do have egos.
Yep.
I would, saying that Trump doesn't have an ego would be wrong.
Yeah.
But Trump has no sense of embarrassment. So he can like control his ego. He can actually take risks.
Yes.
It's this different kind of ego. I don't know what it is, but it's that they cannot bear that he is doing this and they aren't.
1,000%, because this is the quality he has that they don't. He is a fighter. You know what I mean? And he's not demoralized by someone else's success. Don't forget, his whole entree into politics really started in 2012 when Obama was dunking on him at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And he took all the shots and got off the mat and did the thing that burns Howard Stern's balls. Because remember this about Howard. Howard, wanted to be in politics. He ran for governor in New York.
That's right, I forgot.
It was last like 30 seconds. But stick with me. He was a guy whose ego branded himself the king of all media. But he's become so much less omnipotent than Trump, and he complains about everything. Howard Stern is now the Prince Harry of all media. That's kind of what he is. But imagine that does kill him. And then this is the bigger thing, and this is what's new to the Trump movement, is Trump is garnering major support in the black community. And he went to the Bronx. The only time you're going to hear Biden say, "Hello, Bronx," is if he's doing a rally in Staten Island, But that black street cred thing matters. Like 50 Cent matters. He is a guy with a lot of influence, He got shot 9 times and did something more dangerous, like sleep with Chelsea Handler,
But he had his shots.
Yeah. But that stuff matters. The only time Howard or Kimmel have had black support is when they painted it onto their face.
That's true.
Not good.
Very good. All right, Kat, why do celebrities in general struggle with Trump's popularity? Do you think they see popularity as like a finite pie?
No one else said it, so I guess I have to.
What?
It is funny to see you call out other people for having a big ego.
Oh, I am. But thank you. That is such an easy joke. I knew you were going to do that.
Well, you give your pictures of yourself to other people for Christmas.
That is a joke about my ego.
Okay. I honestly, I think that it's not really a celebrity thing. I think it's, I write about this in my new book a little bit. I think it's...
What's your new book called?
I Used to Like You Until.
I
think it's
feel that way.
People pick a lane. People pick a lane. And it can be really hard for people to get out of that lane or even consider anything from anywhere else because they see the other side. It's not just people that they disagree with. It's bad, evil people. So they don't want to listen to anybody else or any other opinions. But I think the thing about stuff that's unprecedented, like what happened here in New York with the conviction, unprecedented leads to more unprecedented. So I think when stuff like that happens, people do pay attention more. But I feel people have also made a lot of money, I think, off of saying these things. Trump is this, Trump is that. People have a fan base that expects them to say those things. I think that can also lead to people not wanting to consider something else than what they've found has made them successful.
I do think some of them drive their careers into the ground out of anger. You know?
That's that's also definitely true in some cases.
All right, we got to move on. Up next, no one's above the law unless it's Hamas drivel you draw.
If you'll be in the New York area and would like tickets to see Gutfeld, go to foxnews.com/Gutfeld and click on the link to join our studio audience.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.